The airplane shook violently at an altitude of 11,000 meters. Screams echoed throughout the cabin. Emergency lights flashed continuously, their red glow casting over terrified faces. In the air, the acrid smell of burning smoke began to spread, suffocating the already overwhelming fear. Captain Kenneth Brooks's voice came over the loudspeaker. In 25 years of flying, this was the first time he could not hide his anxiety. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a severe technical malfunction. I urgently need to ask, is there anyone on this flight who currently has or has ever had experience flying an aircraft? Anyone, civilian or military, please make yourself known to the flight attendants immediately. A deadly silence fell over the cabin. 247 passengers stared at each other, eyes locked in shared terror. Everyone understood. These could be the final moments of their lives. And at that very instant, a man, the same one who, just hours earlier, had been mocked in the business-class cabin for his shabby appearance, slowly stood up. But to understand why this moment mattered so much, we must turn back 4 hours earlier, when the flight departing from Las Vegas, the city of glitter and sin, was preparing for takeoff. If you believe that even in the moments that seem the most hopeless, people can still find the strength to rise, then leave a like on this story. Don't forget to subscribe to True Tale Time to keep hearing journeys where courage and love turn into true miracles. Flight DL-156 from Las Vegas to Washington, D.C. was preparing for takeoff. The business-class cabin glowed under warm golden lights, crystal glasses of Cristal champagne sparkling as they caught the afternoon sun through round windows. This was the world of the accomplished, the place where money and status dictated everything. Trevor Adams fumbled with an oversized suitcase and a pink unicorn-printed backpack. Standing 6 feet tall with broad shoulders that still bore traces of his military years, he looked every bit the soldier he once was. Yet his faded leather jacket, worn-out jeans, and unbranded shoes betrayed a financial reality far from comfortable. Eyes that had once locked onto enemy aircraft at 12,000 meters were now focused solely on fastening the seatbelt for his 7-year-old daughter, Isla. "Daddy, why is everyone looking at us so strangely?" Isla whispered, her wide eyes, mirroring her father's, darting around the cabin. Trevor gently brushed his daughter's curly brown hair, his voice soft. "Don't mind them, sweetheart. We're right where we're supposed to be." He had grown used to such stares ever since Susan, his wife, passed away 3 years earlier. From other parents at the school gates to store clerks watching him count pennies for Isla's new clothes, skeptical eyes always followed the gaunt man in grease-stained work clothes. Across the aisle, Harper Sinclair observed it all with a cold gaze. At 34, she had built a tech empire worth billions. Her sharp bob of golden hair, tailored Armani suit, and accessories that screamed high fashion. Harper was the embodiment of success, straight out of a Forbes magazine spread. But behind the flawless exterior lay unhealed wounds. A lonely childhood in an Upper East Side home where love was measured by grades. The one man she had ever trusted, Richard, had betrayed her, chasing money when the company was still a fledgling startup. "Not everyone belongs in business class," Harper remarked just loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Some people really ought to reconsider whether they can afford this lifestyle." A businessman chuckled. A middle-aged woman shook her head in agreement. Once again, every eye turned toward Trevor, as if he had mistakenly taken a seat that wasn't his. Trevor clenched his jaw, a reflex ingrained from years of military training. But he remembered Susan's words in the hospital room, her frail hands gripping his, Promise me, Trevor. Don't let pride or anger affect Isla. She needs a father who is calm and full of love. Because of that promise, he had given up a fighter pilot career that once paid $150,000 a year, choosing instead to become an aircraft maintenance engineer, earning only $45,000. But in return, he was present for every bedtime story, every small school performance, rather than just a distant shadow of a hero in the skies. "Daddy, why did she say that?" Isla asked softly, her innocent eyes drifting toward Harper. Trevor leaned down to meet her gaze, his voice warm. "Some people only know how to make noise. But we know where we belong, together. And that's what matters most." He pulled out a worn comic book, The Brave Little Airplane, the story Susan had once read to Isla every night. Now, it was a sacred ritual, binding father and daughter. Harper watched the scene, and a strange feeling stirred within her. Trevor's tenderness reminded her of what she had never known. A father who cared more about feelings than achievements. A family bonded by love rather than expectations. She muttered, almost to herself, "True success demands sacrifice and discipline." But immediately after, she felt a hollowness. The cold penthouse in Manhattan, dinners alone overlooking city lights, sleepless nights over quarterly sales, all of it flooded her mind. She wondered, had she been sacrificing the right things? The plane began taxiing away from Las Vegas, the city of neon lights and glittering dreams. Harper had just closed a $500 million contract there, but what awaited her in Washington, D.C. was not another deal. It would be a lesson in true power, the kind born of courage and love, not money or status. Trevor helped Isla fasten her seatbelt again, then checked her ever-present sketchbook. It was filled with drawings of fighter jets, each scribbled with messy labels she had learned from him. "Daddy, today I'm going to draw this plane," Isla said excitedly, pointing out the window. "And I'll draw you flying it, too." Trevor smiled, though his heart ached. Isla still didn't understand why her father no longer sat in a cockpit, why they had left their small house in Colorado Springs near the Air Force Base to live in a shabby Denver apartment. He remembered that last night with Susan, when she whispered, "Isla needs a father to teach her how to live, not just how to survive." Today's business class ticket was the product of 2 years of saving, cutting back on every expense. Not for show, but to give Isla a reprieve from the gray days, to take her to Washington to visit her grandmother, the last living memory of Susan. Harper could never know that the man before her had turned down countless lucrative offers from private airlines, jobs that would have paid well but kept him away from home. Nor could she know that Trevor spent sleepless nights working extra shifts just to afford Isla's piano lessons, the passion she inherited from her mother. The engines roared as the plane accelerated down the runway. Trevor felt the G-force press against his body, a sensation familiar yet different. This time, he wasn't in the cockpit. He was here, beside the most precious thing in his life. From the city of dazzling illusions, the flight was headed toward the center of real power. Yet no one suspected that the greatest strength aboard this plane lay within the very man everyone had scorned. When the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, Trevor pulled out an old iPad for Isla to draw on. The screen was slightly cracked at the corner, but the little girl didn't mind. Her small fingers slid across the glass, sketching airplanes with mighty wings. "Daddy, which plane is the fastest?" Isla asked, her eyes glowing with curiosity. "The SR-71 Blackbird," Trevor answered instantly. "It can fly nearly 4,000 kilometers per hour. But you know, speed isn't the most important thing." "Then what is important?" Isla tilted her head. Trevor fell silent for a moment, his eyes drifting to the window where layers of white clouds streamed past. It's knowing when to fly and when to stay. The answer made Harper, seated nearby, instinctively look up. She had been reviewing her presentation for tomorrow's meeting with the Department of Defense, a contract she had pursued for 3 years. Yet Trevor's words echoed in her mind like a question she had never dared confront. Am I flying too fast? And forgetting the destination? In her head, Harper replayed yesterday's phone call with her mother. As always, Margaret Sinclair cared only about achievement. Are you certain the government deal will succeed? The Pembertons just acquired the second-largest tech company in the state. We cannot fall behind them. Do you ever ask if I'm happy? Harper had retorted. A rare question. Happiness? Her mother had scoffed. Happiness is for people who lack ambition. Now, hearing Trevor speak with his daughter, Harper realized there was another kind of success. The kind measured by a child's pure laughter, by the unwavering trust shining in innocent eyes. She watched as Trevor patiently explained flight principles to Isla. He never lost his temper when she asked the same question again and again, never scolded when she became distracted by a cloud outside the window. She's a lucky girl to have you, Chief Flight Attendant Simone remarked softly while pouring drinks. Trevor smiled. No, I'm the lucky one. Just one simple sentence, yet it pierced Harper's heart. She thought of the cold office late at night, the solitary dinners in her penthouse overlooking the glowing Manhattan skyline. All that luxury, yet no one to share it with. Richard, the only man she had ever loved, had left 7 years earlier, during the company's crisis. You're too focused on work, Harper. You don't have time for me or even for yourself, he had said, before walking away with a younger, simpler woman. Since then, Harper had built walls around her heart. She had learned to judge others before they had the chance to hurt her. She had learned to measure worth by appearances, so she could always control the game. But watching Trevor, clearly not wealthy, yet rich in a completely different way, she began to wonder, had she chosen the wrong path? Daddy, why is everyone still looking at us? Isla asked again, this time with a hint of sadness in her voice. Trevor glanced around the cabin. A few passengers continued to sneak looks at them, whispering to one another. He caught Harper quickly averting her eyes. You know, Trevor said gently, some people judge only by appearances to decide who deserves love. But your mom once taught me, the most important thing is to look at the heart. Isla nodded, with the seriousness of an adult. Mom said every heart is beautiful, it's just sometimes it gets hidden. Trevor's chest tightened at the mention of Susan. He remembered the first time he met her at the military hospital, when he had been injured in a training accident. Susan hadn't cared about his rank or medals. She loved the way he read books to wounded soldiers, loved his devotion to his aging mother back in Ohio. You're too serious, Susan had once teased him on their first date. You need someone to remind you that life is more than duty and discipline. And she had done just that. Susan taught him how to laugh, how to dance in the kitchen, how to see beauty in the ordinary. When Isla was born, Trevor believed he had everything. Then came the cruel hand of cancer, swift and merciless. In the final 8 months of her life, Susan poured every ounce of strength into preparing Trevor for a world without her. You have to promise me, Susan had said one freezing winter night. Teach Isla to love without fear. Don't let pain turn into anger at the world. Trevor had kept that promise, though at times it was unbearably hard. Like now, surrounded by contemptuous glances, he still chose gentleness over rage. Harper watched it all, but she couldn't see the whole picture. To her, he was just a man who looked out of place here. She didn't know about the sleepless nights Trevor spent nursing Isla through fevers, or the lucrative job offers he had turned down just to be there for school drop-offs and pickups. In the cabin, some passengers began to show annoyance, as if Trevor and Isla's very presence somehow tainted the elite atmosphere. But Trevor didn't care. He focused only on his daughter, sketching clouds with her outside the window. No one knew that within just minutes, all those judgments would mean nothing, that this very man, the one scorned by all, would become their only hope. The plane pressed on toward Washington, D.C., carrying untold stories, unhealed wounds, and a destiny about to intertwine. At 11,000 meters, everything could change in an instant. First Officer Diego Alvarez was performing routine checks when a wave of nausea hit. 35 years old, 12 years of flying, he had never felt this way in a cockpit. "Kenneth, I don't feel well," Diego whispered, his hand trembling as he wiped sweat from his brow. Captain Kenneth Brooks, 48, with graying hair and the sharp eyes of a man who had weathered countless emergencies, glanced at his colleague. 23 years in the air had taught him how to read danger signs. "Can you hold on?" The answer came not in words, but in the body. Diego collapsed forward, convulsing. At that very moment, the plane shrieked with alarms. First came the beeping of the hydraulic system. Then the number 2 engine warning light flashed red. Next, the acrid stench of burning metal, the telltale scent of overloaded circuitry. "Mayday! Mayday! Mayday! This is Flight DL-156. We are experiencing a severe technical malfunction," Kenneth radioed in. His voice maintained training standard calm, but his hands had begun to shake. The aircraft jolted violently. This was no ordinary turbulence. These were bone-rattling thrashes that hurled belongings across the cabin. Harper's champagne glass shattered, golden liquid mixing with shards on the floor. Children screamed. Adults shouted. Magazines and laptops flew like stray missiles. Amid the chaos, Trevor reacted like the fighter pilot he once was. He wrapped Isla tightly in his arms, one hand shielding her head, the other locking her seatbelt down. "It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy's here." His voice was eerily steady in the storm. For the first time, Harper felt powerless. Money, power, connections, all meaningless at this altitude. She clutched the armrest so hard her knuckles turned white. Kenneth's voice filled the cabin, carrying for the first time in his career a trace of fear. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a critical emergency. The first officer has lost consciousness and requires immediate medical aid. Is there any pilot, current or former, aboard this flight? Civilian or military, please make yourself known to the crew immediately." A deathly silence fell. 247 passengers looked at one another with terror in their eyes. Everyone understood. These could be the final minutes of their lives. Chief Flight Attendant Simone hurried down the aisle, scanning each face, desperate for a spark of hope. Trevor's heart pounded. He recognized the sound of an aircraft spiraling out of control, the smell of failing electrics, the unsettling sideways sway. In his mind, 2 voices collided. The soldier. "They need you. 247 lives." The father. "You promised Susan. Don't put yourself in danger. Isla needs a father, not a hero who falls." Isla looked up at him, trembling but with absolute trust. "Daddy, we're going to be okay, right?" Trevor hugged her tighter. He remembered Susan's words on that final night. "If there's ever a moment when Isla needs you to do the right thing, no matter the risk, do it." That's the only way to truly protect her. The plane shuddered violently again. Trevor knew this was no minor malfunction. This was life or death. He reached into his jacket pocket, fingers brushing against a worn leather wallet. Behind his license was an expired military ID, a reminder of another life. Lieutenant Colonel Trevor Adams, 15th Fighter Squadron, United States Air Force. 15 years of service. 2,847 combat flight hours. 156 missions. F-22 Raptors at 2,400 kilometers per hour. One emergency landing on a bombed-out runway. One time saving his entire crew after an engine was shot out over Afghanistan. "Isla, sweetheart, can you be brave for Daddy?" Through tears, Isla nodded firmly. "I'll be brave, Daddy." Trevor kissed her forehead, then stood. The movement drew every eye. Harper froze. The man she had mocked now radiated something entirely different. Calm, decisive authority, as if an invisible force field had enveloped him. As Simone passed, Trevor handed her the military ID. She glanced at it and stopped cold. "Lieutenant Colonel? Fighter pilot?" "Yes, I can help," Trevor said. His voice had shifted, from gentle father to commanding officer. "That's my dad," Isla cried out, choked but proud. "My dad flew the fastest planes in the world." The business class cabin fell silent. Those who had mocked him now stared with a different kind of awe. Harper's cheeks burned as though she had been slapped. The worn leather jacket she had sneered at was a flight jacket. The unbranded shoes, pilot training boots. His precise movements, the bearing of a man who had once controlled weapons worth hundreds of millions. "I'm sorry, she stammered. But Trevor had already turned, following Simone toward the cockpit. Inside, Kenneth seemed revived. One glance at the ID in Simone's hand told him everything. "Thank God." "What's the situation, Colonel?" Trevor scanned the panels. Diego, unconscious, breathing weak. Control board glowing red. Hydraulics at 40%. Number 2, engine overheating. Ahead, a wall of black storm clouds. "Give me 30 seconds to refamiliarize with the panel," Trevor said as he slid into the co-pilot's seat. "Then we'll bring everyone home." Back in the cabin, Isla sat clutching her sketchbook with the drawing of an airplane. Harper looked at her, truly looked, for the first time. No longer seeing an out-of-place child, but the daughter of a hero. "Are you scared?" Harper asked softly. Isla shook her head. "No. Daddy always keeps his promises. He's going to save everyone." And in the cockpit, Trevor was preparing to keep the greatest promise of his life. Not just to Susan, but to the 247 souls whose lives now rested in his hands. The cockpit of the Boeing 777 now felt like a battlefield. Trevor slid into the co-pilot's seat, his hands moving across the control panel with instinctive familiarity. 15 years in the military had carved into his body the ability to adapt to any aircraft. "Status?" he asked, his voice professional, clipped. Kenneth answered quickly. "Hydraulic system down 60%. Engine number 2 is overheating but still running. Diego is showing severe food poisoning symptoms. And ahead," he paused, "is the biggest storm I've ever seen." Trevor looked outside. Dense black clouds loomed like mountains, lightning tearing through the sky. This was not just a test of skill. It was a battle with nature itself. "Nearest airport?" Trevor asked, eyes fixed on the navigation display. "Pittsburgh. About 85 minutes under normal conditions. But with this situation—" "We'll make it," Trevor cut in, his voice firm. "Contact Pittsburgh Tower. Declare emergency. They need to have fire and medical teams ready. While Kenneth transmitted the alert, Trevor scanned the panel. The situation was worse than anything he had faced in Afghanistan. The difference this time, 247 lives depended on him, including his little girl. The aircraft plunged into the black mass of cloud. The first hit felt like a giant fist. The fuselage heaved violently. Overhead bins flew open, luggage crashing down. Altitude 9,500 meters, speed 420, heading 090. Trevor reported steadily, hands shifting into manual control. Kenneth glanced at him, astonished by his icy calm. In his career, he had flown with hundreds of pilots. Few ever held such composure. But in Trevor's mind, Susan's face flickered like a slow-motion reel. "Promise me, Trevor. If anything happens, what about Isla?" "I won't let anything happen. But if it does, promise me, you'll always choose the path that brings you home to her. Choose safety, not heroics." Now Trevor knew he had to break that promise, to keep an even greater one, to protect Isla at all costs. In business class, Harper experienced, for the first time, true smallness. Wealth, reputation, status, all meaningless as the aircraft shook in the storm. What strangled her wasn't just fear of death, but regret. She remembered Trevor's eyes when she had scorned him, remembered every person she had ever judged as unworthy. "Excuse me?" The small voice made Harper turn. Isla sat alone, clutching her sketchbook. Her face was strangely calm. "Aren't you afraid?" Harper asked, her own voice trembling. "Of course," Isla nodded. "But Mommy taught me. Sometimes you have to be afraid, so you can be brave. And I know Daddy will bring us home." Harper was stunned. A 7-year-old girl, with a cheap unicorn backpack, had something she had chased her whole life: inner peace, unwavering trust, unconditional love. "Your dad, he's so brave," Harper whispered. Isla smiled softly. "Daddy doesn't like people calling him brave. He says the bravest thing is when he comes home every night to read me a story, or wakes up early to make heart-shaped pancakes every Saturday." The innocent words hit Harper like a lightning strike. She thought of her father, the powerful, successful man who had never once woken up to make pancakes for his daughter, and of herself, who had achieved everything on paper, yet never been loved enough for something so simple. In the cockpit, the situation worsened rapidly. The storm was fiercer than predicted, crosswinds lashing relentlessly. Trevor and Kenneth had to strain their whole bodies to keep the aircraft from nosediving. "Pittsburgh Tower, this is DL-156, Kenneth called into the radio, his voice taut as a wire. "We're taking severe storm hits. Request immediate guidance. DL-156, signal received. The storm is moving faster than forecast. Can you maintain current speed?" Trevor checked the gauges. Fuel dropping rapidly, hydraulics deteriorating further. They were racing against time. "We need to descend," Trevor decided. "Fly beneath the cloud layer to avoid the worst of it." "That will burn more fuel." "No other choice." The aircraft dropped to 6,000 meters. The plunge felt like falling into hell. The fuselage shuddered like a boat in a tsunami. Screams, sobs, and prayers filled the cabin. Then, a small voice began to sing. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are." Isla's voice, fragile, wavering, the lullaby Susan had sung every night. In that moment, her pure sound rose like a tiny light in the darkness. The screams faded. Passengers fell silent, listening. A 7-year-old girl in the middle of the storm was giving the entire cabin peace. Tears streamed down Harper's face. She couldn't believe that Isla, the child she had once dismissed, was now the source of hope for everyone. In the cockpit, Trevor heard his daughter's song through the cabin intercom. His chest tightened, but pride swelled inside him. Isla was doing what Susan had taught her, bringing light to the darkest places. "We're going to make it," Trevor whispered to Kenneth and to himself. "We have to. For Isla. For the other 246 lives. For the promise to Susan. And for a love greater than any fear." The plane drove on through the storm, carrying the fragile hope of 247 souls praying for a miracle. 30 minutes in the storm felt like 30 years. Trevor and Kenneth braced against every gust, every flash of lightning, every raindrop pelting the windshield like bullets. Altitude 4,500 meters. Speed 380 kilometers per hour, Trevor reported steadily, his hands slick with sweat. "Hydraulics at 25%. We need to land now," the radio crackled. "DL-156, runway 28R is clear. Fire and medical crews are standing by. Southwest winds 45 kilometers per hour, within limits." Through the curtain of rain, Pittsburgh's runway lights shimmered, guiding stars in the dark. But, with crippled hydraulics, landing now was like walking a tightrope with no net. "Kenneth, I'll take the landing." "You handle comms and engine watch," Trevor said crisply. Both men knew Trevor's emergency landing experience was their best chance. "Trevor, I trust you." For the first time in 3 years, Trevor Adams set his hands on a control yoke. A familiar current surged through his body like electricity. This was where he belonged, what he was born for. In the cabin, Isla still sang softly. A few passengers joined her. The simple lullaby had become a hymn of hope. Harper couldn't take her eyes off the child. All her life, she had believed power came from money and influence. But here, now, she saw it came from love, trust, and light in the darkness. 3,000 meters. Beginning approach, Trevor announced over the PA. "Passengers, fasten seatbelts, sit upright, prepare for landing." His voice was so calm, it soothed the cabin. In his mind, Susan appeared again. "Are you afraid?" "Yes. But I trust you. I always trust you to come home. I promise. And if you had to choose between being a hero and coming home, I'd choose coming home. Trevor, sometimes being a hero is the only way to come home." 2,000 meters. Speed stable. The runway grew clearer, the airport lights glittering like diamonds in the rain. This was the hardest moment. No hydraulics to rely on, only his hands. It was like the battlefield long ago, except now he carried 247 souls, including his daughter. 1,000 meters. Stable. Trevor's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. Kenneth glanced over, eyes filled with respect. In 23 years of flying, he had rarely seen such composure. 500 meters. Brace for contact. The cabin held its breath. Isla stopped singing, eyes fixed on the runway lights rushing toward them. Harper's life flashed before her. Triumphs, failures, all the times she had missed love. "If I live, I'll change," she swore, to herself, to God, to the universe. 100! 50! The wheels struck, a jolt, then a bounce, then grip. Trevor instantly reversed thrust, clamped the brakes. On the slick runway, the jet skidded, shuddered, then slowed. Fire trucks flanked them like escorts. Finally, a full stop. 1 second of silence, then thunderous applause. People hugged, cried, laughed. They were alive. They were home. Kenneth turned, eyes damp. "You saved us." All of us, Trevor nodded, unbuckling. In his mind, there was only one name: Isla. When Trevor stepped out of the cockpit, the entire cabin rose to applaud. Those same eyes that once scorned him now shone with respect. But Trevor didn't notice. He saw only one person. "Daddy!" Isla threw herself into his arms. Trevor held her tight, all the tension melting away like smoke. This was the real victory. A few steps away, Harper stood frozen. She didn't dare come closer. In her chest, a crushing weight pressed down, guilt and shame choking her breath. The man she had mocked, dismissed for hours, had just saved her life, and the lives of over 246 others. At that moment, Harper knew. No apology could ever be enough. Trevor glanced over, noticing Harper hesitate, words caught in her throat. His eyes held no anger, no resentment, only the calm of someone who had already faced the truth she had just been forced to confront. Harper began, then faltered. She drew a shaky breath, swallowed hard, and whispered, "I'm sorry. I was wrong." Trevor nodded slightly. "We all misjudge sometimes." The simple reply made Harper's heart constrict. He hadn't even blamed her. That very grace only deepened the chasm she felt between them. "No," Harper shook her head firmly. "What I did wasn't just a misjudgment. I behaved horribly, exactly like the people I've hated most." Trevor stayed silent. No judgment, no comfort. He simply allowed her to confront her own words. "I need time," Harper finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "to think about myself, about how I've lived. I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Not yet." Isla tugged at her father's sleeve, whispering, "Daddy." She looked so sad. Trevor bent down, smiling gently. "That's right, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups need more time to understand what really matters." Harper heard every word. Tears welled in her eyes. Even now, Trevor was teaching his daughter compassion. Passengers began disembarking. Harper deliberately lingered until the very end. At the doorway, she turned back. Trevor was bent over, helping Isla gather her things, his demeanor as calm as ever. "Mr. Adams," Harper called softly. Trevor looked up. "Thank you. Not just for saving our lives, but for showing me who I really am." Trevor nodded, his voice low but steady. "Everyone deserves a second chance." Even with themselves, Ms. Sinclair Harper stepped down the stairs. The rain had eased, the runway gleamed under the lights. She felt both empty and strangely light. For the first time in her life, she had no idea what tomorrow would bring, and that was terrifying. Yet it felt like freedom. 3 months later, Trevor was bent under the belly of a Boeing 737 at Denver Airport when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, he would ignore it, but something today made him pick up. "Hello, this is Trevor." The voice on the other end hesitated. "Mr. Adams, this is Harper Sinclair. I'm not sure if you even remember me." Trevor paused, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. "I remember. I know this is sudden. Next week I'll be in Denver visiting a company program we're sponsoring. I was wondering if you and Isla might, maybe, have lunch with me." Trevor stayed silent. He could hear the nervousness in her voice, so different from the cold, confident woman she once was. "I'll ask Isla," he finally said. "Call me back tomorrow evening." "Thank you. Really, thank you." That evening, Trevor told Isla. The girl was busy drawing, not even looking up. "Daddy, does she sound lonely?" "Why do you think that?" "Because people who aren't lonely don't call strangers." Trevor chuckled. Sometimes his daughter's sensitivity startled him. "So do you want to meet her again?" Isla set down her pencil, looked at her father seriously. "Mom used to say, some people need to be reminded they deserve to be loved too. Maybe she's one of them." 1 week later, the small cafe in downtown Denver was unlike anywhere Harper Sinclair usually went. No expensive furniture, no elaborate menu, just a few old wooden tables and the rich smell of roasted coffee. Harper arrived 15 minutes early. For the past 3 months, she had tried living differently, working fewer weekends, joining charity projects, even hiring a therapist. Yet the thought of meeting Trevor and Isla still made her restless. "Miss Harper," Isla squealed. Trevor followed with a gentle smile. "Hello, Isla." "Hello, Mr. Adams. Just call me Trevor," he replied. Harper nodded. Isla studied her closely, then said bluntly, "You look different. Not grumpy like before." "Isla," Trevor reminded. Harper laughed, the first genuine laugh in months. "She's right. I've changed." The conversation was awkward at first, then slowly flowed. Harper spoke about her new charity program, supporting single-parent families with childcare. "Why did you choose that direction?" Trevor asked. Harper glanced at Isla, who was doodling on a napkin. "Because I realized I spent my whole life chasing the wrong things. I thought success was beating others. But it turns out, success is lifting others up." Trevor just nodded. Isla suddenly looked up and asked, "Are you lonely?" Harper froze, then nodded. "Yes, for a very long time. Then why don't you make friends?" "Because I forgot how. I only knew how to win, and now—" Harper smiled faintly. "Now I'm learning again." Bit by bit. After lunch, as they prepared to leave, Isla handed Harper her sketchbook. On the page was a plane soaring through a storm, light shining from the cockpit. Inside the cabin, 2 women held hands. "This is me and you," Isla explained. "Mom used to say sometimes we need to hold hands so we're not as scared." Harper's eyes blurred. "Can I keep this drawing?" "Yes," Isla tore the page out. "But you have to promise me one thing." "What's that?" "That you'll remember there's always someone willing to hold your hand when you're afraid." 6 months later, Harper's new office was smaller, cozier. On the wall, Isla's drawing was framed with care. Her phone buzzed. A text from Trevor. "Isla's been selected for the Kids Aviation program. She wants to invite you to her showcase." If you're free, Harper looked at her schedule, a day packed with meetings, but her eyes stopped at the drawing on the wall. She typed back, "I'll be there." For the first time in her life, Harper Sinclair canceled her entire calendar. Not out of duty, not out of guilt, but because of a promise to a 7-year-old girl. And she realized true connections aren't measured by power or money. They're measured in the moments we choose to show up for one another, in putting love before success, in seeing the real person behind the surface. Sometimes, the most important lessons arrive in the darkest moments, when the sky seems to collapse, and we must choose, stay the same, or become a better version of ourselves. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Was Trevor a hero, or simply a father keeping his promise? I want to hear your opinion. If you believe true strength isn't found in money or power, but in love, and the moments we choose to be there for one another, then give this video a like. Don't forget to subscribe to True Tale Time, and ring the bell so you never miss a story where justice, truth, and humanity always find their place. And if today's story touched your heart, share this video so that anyone feeling lost will remember. Sometimes, in life's storms, all we need is a hand willing to hold ours. See you in the next story, where every tear, every smile, carries a lesson worth keeping.